David thought his marriage was perfect, until a single text shattered his illusion. When he discovers his wife Emily's affair, his world collapses, and the man he once was begins to unravel. Fueled by betrayal, David crafts a calculated plan for revenge, determined to make Emily feel the weight of her choices. But as his actions spiral beyond his control, the line between justice and destruction blurs, leading to an unexpected and tragic conclusion that neither of them could have foreseen. What happens when love turns to revenge, and revenge turns to ruin? A haunting tale of betrayal, consequences, and the unforgiving cost of vengeance. I'm David, and I used to believe I was living a dream life. A beautiful wife, a cozy suburban home, and a career that kept us financially secure. For over 10 years, I thought Emily and I were partners against the world. The couple everyone admired. The kind of marriage where you grow old together, sitting on the porch with iced tea, reminiscing about your youth. At least, that's the fairy tale I told myself. It all started unraveling on a Tuesday morning, simple as any other. I'd left for work a little later than usual and came back in the afternoon because I'd forgotten some paperwork for a client meeting. Emily was supposed to be working from home, her usual schedule for Tuesdays. I parked in the driveway, grabbed my folder from the passenger seat, and walked inside. The door was unlocked, odd, because Emily always kept it bolted when I wasn't around. Emily? I called out. Silence. I walked into the kitchen and saw her phone charging on the counter, next to the half-full cup of coffee she'd been drinking. That's when I noticed something that didn't sit right. Emily was always glued to her phone. It was practically an extension of her hand. So why would she leave it unattended, unlocked, and in plain sight? Out of pure reflex, my eyes flicked to the screen as it lit up. I wish I hadn't looked. The message came from a contact saved as Jake Work Conference, and it wasn't subtle. Can't wait to see you tonight. I stared at it, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was some joke. But a chill swept through me as the realization hit, this wasn't a joke. This wasn't innocent. This was betrayal in bright white letters. I didn't hear her come in through the back door. She'd been in the garden, still holding a pair of gardening shears and covered in dirt. She froze when she saw me standing in the kitchen, holding her phone. David, she said, her voice a mix of confusion and concern. What are you doing here? I held up the phone. This message just popped up. Her face turned white as paper. David, it's not what you think. What is it, then? My voice was cold, harder than I intended. Is this some inside joke? A typo? Because it looks pretty straightforward to me, Emily. She didn't answer right away. Her hand clenched around the gardening shears as if she were holding onto them for balance. It's complicated, she finally said, her voice small. Complicated? I scoffed, tossing the phone onto the counter. That's a funny word for cheating on your husband. Her eyes flashed with anger then, the guilt replaced with something more stubborn. I haven't cheated on you, David. You're making assumptions based on one text message. I can explain. Then explain. I folded my arms, waiting, daring her to lie to my face. But instead of an explanation, she looked away. In that moment, the truth settled in my gut like a lead weight. Emily wasn't going to explain because she couldn't. She was guilty. The woman I'd trusted more than anyone else had betrayed me, and there wasn't a damn thing she could say to fix it. I didn't shout or throw things. I didn't accuse her any further. I just turned and walked out the front door, leaving her standing in the kitchen. My head was spinning as I climbed into my car and drove off. I didn't go back to the office. I couldn't. I found myself parked in a nondescript lot at the edge of town, staring blankly at the steering wheel. My thoughts ran in circles. What had I done wrong? Was it something I'd missed? Had I been too focused on work? Too emotionally distant? The questions gnawed at me until I couldn't think straight. I replayed our marriage in my head, searching for cracks I must have ignored. Emily and I had always been good together, or so I thought. We traveled, spent time with friends, even laughed at stupid TV shows on lazy Sundays. Sure, the spark had faded a little, like it does in every long-term marriage. But we were fine. Weren't we? Eventually, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Not to Emily. Not yet. Instead, I called Matt, a buddy of mine who worked as a private investigator. We'd played on the same softball team for years, and I knew he could be trusted. "Matt," I said when he picked up. My voice was calmer than I felt. "I need your help." When I got home that evening, Emily was already in bed. I heard the shower running earlier, her attempt at washing away the day. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. I lay awake on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say but couldn't. In the morning, I acted like nothing had happened. I got up, made coffee, kissed her on the forehead as I left for work. She looked relieved, like I'd dropped the matter, like she'd dodged a bullet. If only she knew. Matt got back to me a few days later. "You were right," he said. His voice had that practiced calm, the one he used when delivering bad news. "She's been seeing him. A guy named Jake. Work colleague, it looks like. Hotels, dinners. They've been meeting up on the weekends when you thought she was traveling for work." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Even though I already knew, hearing it confirmed felt like being punched in the chest. "How long?" 6 months, give or take. I closed my eyes. 6 months. Half a year of lies, sneaking around, and stolen moments with another man. Matt hesitated before continuing. "I've got photos, too. Receipts. Everything you'll need. Everything I'll need." For what, though? Divorce? Confrontation? I didn't know yet. But what I did know was that I couldn't let this go. "Send me everything," I said. "I'll figure out the rest." The night I decided to set my plan in motion, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Emily sleep. She looked peaceful, her chest rising and falling in rhythm. It's funny how you can know someone so well and yet not know them at all. The woman lying there wasn't the same one I'd married. Or maybe she was, and I'd been too blind to see it. I left her a note in the kitchen the next morning. "I planned something special for our anniversary," it said. "Pack your bags. We're going away for the weekend." Emily's face lit up when I told her. "You're serious? Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." It wasn't a lie. It would be a surprise, just not the kind she was expecting. On Friday afternoon, we packed up the car and headed to the resort. Emily chatted the whole way, acting like nothing had happened. Her guilt, if she felt any, was well hidden behind her sunny demeanor. "This is so thoughtful of you, David," she said, squeezing my hand as we pulled into the long, winding driveway of the luxury resort. I smiled back. "Anything for you." The resort was beautiful, just like the photos online. Manicured gardens, ocean views, infinity pools that seemed to stretch into the horizon. Emily's eyes sparkled as we checked in, completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath my calm exterior. That night, I made dinner reservations at the resort's finest restaurant. I pulled out all the stops, champagne, lobster, the works. Emily was glowing. "You really outdid yourself," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "To us." "To us," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. I watched her as she sipped, her smile wide, her eyes bright. She thought she'd won. She thought I'd let it all slide. But Emily didn't know me as well as she thought. I don't forgive betrayal. I don't forget. And I never lose. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the curtains as Emily stretched lazily in bed. I watched her for a moment, her face soft and content, like nothing had happened. She had no idea her little dream world was about to collapse. I smiled to myself, a slow burn of satisfaction building in my chest. "Morning," she said with a yawn, turning to me. "You're up early." "Wanted to make sure today was perfect for us," I replied, my tone even. "I ordered breakfast to the room. It should be here soon." Her face lit up. "You're spoiling me, David. I don't deserve you." I nearly laughed at the irony of her words but forced a smile instead. "Of course you do." We spent the morning like any other couple on a romantic getaway. Emily lounged by the pool, a frozen cocktail in her hand while I read a book, pretending to relax. Every time she laughed, every time she looked at me with those adoring eyes, I felt my resolve strengthen. She'd made her choice. Now it was my turn. At lunch, I suggested a walk along the cliffs. The resort had a private trail that led to a breathtaking overlook of the ocean. Emily loved nature, and she was practically giddy as we made our way along the winding path. Birds chirped above, and the sea breeze rustled the tall grass around us. "This is perfect," she said, slipping her hand into mine. "Thank you for this, David." I squeezed her hand, looking at her like I used to, the love in my expression masking the storm in my chest. "Anything for you, Em." The cliffside trail was narrow, carved into the rock face with an iron railing for safety. When we reached the overlook, Emily gasped. "It's beautiful," she whispered, stepping close to the edge. The water stretched endlessly below, the waves crashing against jagged rocks. I stood behind her, silent for a long moment, letting the sound of the ocean fill the air. Then, softly, I said, "You know, it's funny how life gives us moments like this." Emily turned her head, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" I stepped closer, my voice calm, steady. "A chance to come clean. To be honest. A chance to tell the truth before the lies catch up." Her eyes darted to mine, and something in her expression shifted. The color in her face drained just a little. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to sound confused. I took a deep breath, as if savoring the fresh sea air. "I know, Emily. About Jake. About the hotels. The late nights and work trips that never were." She froze. The sound of the waves seemed to grow louder. "David, I..." "Save it," I said sharply, my voice cutting her off. "I've got the photos. The receipts. 6 months of lies, Emily. 6 months of betrayal." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned back toward the ocean, her body stiff, as if she couldn't bear to look at me. How did you find out?" "I'm not stupid," I replied, stepping closer. "You really thought you could hide this from me? From the man who's shared every part of his life with you?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she turned to face me. "David, it wasn't like that. It just happened. I didn't mean for any of it." "Don't," I snapped, my voice cold. "Don't insult me by pretending this was some accident. You chose this, Emily. Every text, every hotel room, you chose him over me." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the bench nearby, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered through her sobs. "I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't even know why I did it. I love you, David." I laughed then. Not a kind laugh, but a hollow, bitter sound that echoed off the cliffs. "Love me? You don't betray someone you love. You don't crawl into another man's bed while your husband is at home trusting you. Love doesn't look like this." Emily looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Please, David. Please don't hate me. I'll end it, I'll never see him again. I swear." Just don't leave me. We can fix this. I stared at her for a long moment, the broken woman in front of me a stranger. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up late working to give her the life she wanted. The times I kissed her goodbye, oblivious to where she was really going. I thought about every lie, every moment stolen from me. Finally, I spoke. Do you think he'd still want you if he knew what you really are? If he saw you like this? Emily flinched as if I'd struck her. David, stop. Do you think he loves you, Emily? I pressed, my voice rising. Or is it just the thrill of sneaking around? Because once the thrill's gone, all you'll have left is the wreckage of your life. She shook her head, sobbing harder. I'm begging you, David. Please, don't leave me. I'll do anything. I took a step back, crossing my arms over my chest. Anything? Yes, she whispered desperately, reaching out toward me. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. To make it right. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before I nodded, as if considering her offer. Okay, I said finally. Let's fix this. Her face lit up with hope, but I wasn't done. First, I want you to call Jake. Right now. Emily froze, her eyes widening. What? You heard me, I said calmly, pulling her phone from my pocket. I'd grabbed it earlier when she wasn't paying attention. Call him. Tell him it's over. David, Do it, I said, my tone sharp as a knife. If you want to fix this, prove it to me. End it with him right now. She stared at the phone in my hand, her face pale. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then, slowly, she took the phone from me. Her hands shook as she unlocked it and pulled up Jake's contact. I watched her every move, my arms crossed, my heart pounding in my chest. She pressed the call button and brought the phone to her ear. It rang once. Twice. Then he answered. Hey, babe, Jake's voice came through the speaker. What's up? Emily's face crumpled. Jake, we need to talk. What's wrong? He asked, his tone shifting. You okay? I can't do this anymore, Emily said, her voice trembling. It's over. I'm done. There was silence on the other end. Then Jake's voice came back, sharp and defensive. What are you talking about? Where is this coming from? It doesn't matter, she said quickly. It's over. Don't call me again. Don't text me. I'm staying with my husband. Jake started shouting then, demanding answers, cursing her name. Emily ended the call, her hand shaking as she lowered the phone. There, she said softly, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I did it. Are you happy now? I stared at her for a moment before giving a small, humorless smile. Not yet. David, please, she whispered. I can't take this. I know I messed up, but... Pack your things, I said, cutting her off. We're leaving tonight. Emily blinked in confusion. But the weekend? The weekend's over, I said, turning my back to her and starting down the trail. You wanted to fix this, Emily. I just gave you a start. But don't think for 1 second that it's enough. She didn't move right away. I heard her sobs echoing behind me, carried on the wind. But eventually, I heard her footsteps following, slow and broken. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The drive back to the house was quiet. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the rolling landscape outside. I could see her reflection in the window, red-rimmed eyes, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She didn't dare speak, and I didn't invite her to. I kept my hands steady on the wheel as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of crimson. The road stretched endlessly before us, but my mind was racing. My plan wasn't finished. Not yet. By the time we pulled into the driveway, night had fallen, and the house loomed dark and quiet. Emily shifted uneasily in her seat as I killed the engine. For a moment, she looked at me, her eyes searching for something, mercy, maybe, or forgiveness, but she wouldn't find it here. Go inside, I said, my voice cold and even. I'll bring the bags in. She hesitated but didn't argue. Wordlessly, she climbed out of the car and disappeared into the house, leaving the door ajar behind her. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. What happens next? That was the question I kept asking myself. Revenge is an ugly thing. It eats at you, poisons your mind, and leaves a part of you hollow when it's done. But Emily's betrayal had taken something from me, something I couldn't just let go of. I needed her to understand what she'd done. I needed her to feel the weight of it. By the time I walked inside with the bags, Emily had already disappeared upstairs. I set the luggage down in the living room and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle over me. Then I followed her. She was sitting on the edge of the bed when I walked in, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She looked up as I entered, but I ignored her, heading straight for the closet. I opened the door, grabbed a spare pillow and blanket, and turned back toward the door. David? Her voice was small, fragile. I'm sleeping in the guest room, I said simply. Her face crumpled. David, please. Don't shut me out like this. I know what I did was wrong, but... Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. My patience for her words had run dry. You don't get to justify this. You don't get to act like you're the victim here. She blinked back tears. I'm not. I'm not the victim. I just... Stop, I said sharply. Just stop. She fell silent. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her, really looking at her. This woman, the one who swore to stand beside me through everything, had burned it all down for a thrill. And now she was sitting there, small and broken, like I was supposed to pity her. I'll see you in the morning, I said, and I closed the door behind me. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on the stiff guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over again. The way she smiled at me at dinner while texting him under the table. The lies about work trips. The stolen moments I'd never get back. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and sat at the small desk in the corner of the room. I wasn't done yet. I'd told myself I would let the truth burn everything down, but that wasn't enough. Emily needed to see the fire. I started gathering everything. Every receipt, every photo the PI had sent me. I created folders, labeled them clearly, and dropped the evidence inside. I pulled up my email and started typing. First, a draft to Jake. Subject, thought you should know. Body. You might want to see what's attached. I think it's time you knew what kind of woman Emily really is. Attached, every piece of evidence I had. Then, one to Emily's boss. Subject, regarding Emily's work trips. Body. Dear Joy. It's come to my attention that Emily's recent absences under the pretense of business trips have been less than professional. I thought you might want to know how company resources have been spent. I attached photos of the receipts, hotel rooms booked during days she was supposed to be working. Dates. Times. A carefully constructed paper trail that would be impossible to deny. I hovered my finger over the send button, my heart pounding in my chest. The thrill of it burned through me like adrenaline, but there was something else, too, an edge of hesitation. Once I did this, there was no going back. I'd be lighting the match and watching everything go up in flames. I thought about Emily, sleeping down the hall. I thought about her tears, her desperate pleas to fix what she'd broken. But then I thought about Jake, about the smug satisfaction he probably felt every time he touched my wife. No. There was no hesitation left. I hit send. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was already streaming through the window. I hadn't meant to fall asleep at the desk, but exhaustion had finally won out. I sat up, my neck stiff, my heart pounding as I remembered what I'd done. Downstairs, I could hear Emily moving around in the kitchen. The smell of coffee wafted through the air, and for a split second, it felt like any other morning. I got up, splashed water on my face, and made my way downstairs. Emily was standing at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She looked up when she saw me, and for a brief moment, her face softened with hope. "Morning," she said softly. "I made coffee." I didn't respond. I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down, waiting. Emily hesitated, then brought the mugs over, setting one in front of me. She sat across the table, her hands wrapped tightly around her own cup. "David," she started, her voice trembling. "I want to talk. Please." I leaned back in the chair, my arms crossed. "Go ahead." She swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I screwed everything up. But I meant what I said, I want to fix this. I want to make it right." I watched her silently, letting her stumble through her words. "I ended it with Jake. You saw that. He doesn't mean anything to me. It was a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake. But it doesn't have to be the end of us." I tilted my head, my gaze steady. "Why did you do it?" Emily blinked, as if the question surprised her. I don't know. I felt like something was missing. Like I wasn't enough for you anymore." I laughed bitterly. "So you thought sleeping with another man would solve that?" "No," she said quickly. "I didn't think. I wasn't thinking. It just happened." "That's a lie," I said coldly. 6 months, Emily. 6 months of sneaking around. That didn't just happen. You made a choice. Over and over again. Tears welled in her eyes again, but I didn't let up. "You don't get to play the victim here," I continued. "You did this. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're asking me to pick up the pieces for you." "I just want a chance," she whispered. "A chance to prove to you that I can be better. That I can be the wife you deserve." I stood up, pushing the chair back with a screech. "We'll see." Emily looked up at me, confused. "What does that mean?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said as I grabbed my keys and walked toward the door. I could feel her eyes on me as I left the house, her voice calling after me one last time. "David, wait." But I didn't wait. I closed the door behind me and stepped outside, the cold morning air filling my lungs. The match had already been lit. And there was no stopping the fire now. When I returned home later that evening, the house was dark. The streetlights outside cast faint shadows across the walls, and the silence was deafening. I stood in the doorway for a moment, listening for any signs of life. Nothing. "Emily?" I called out, but there was no answer. I walked into the kitchen, expecting to find her sitting at the table, waiting for me, begging again for another chance. Instead, I found the coffee mugs from that morning still sitting on the counter, untouched and cold. A strange feeling prickled at the back of my neck. Something was off. I set my keys down and made my way upstairs. The light was on in our bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, almost too perfectly, as if she'd gone out of her way to erase any evidence of having been there. The closet door hung open, and the space where Emily's suitcase usually sat was empty. That's when I noticed it, an envelope resting on my nightstand, my name scrawled in her familiar handwriting. Slowly, I crossed the room and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the letter for what felt like an eternity before picking it up. My fingers trembled as I slid the paper out of the envelope and unfolded it. David. I'm sorry. I've said it 1,000 times, but I know it's not enough. I don't deserve forgiveness, and I won't ask for it again. I destroyed the trust we built, and I ruined everything that mattered between us. But you were right, I made my choices. I betrayed you. And now you're making your choices, too. I know about the emails you sent. To Jake. To my boss. I can't blame you for that. I broke us beyond repair, and I know you want me to pay for it. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. I don't know why I did what I did, maybe because I never believed I deserved you. Maybe I wanted to sabotage what was good because I didn't know how to be happy. I don't have an answer, David. I wish I did. But I can't face the consequences of what I've done. I'm not strong enough for that. I can't bear to look at you and see the hate in your eyes. I can't bear the shame I feel knowing I've destroyed everything. You don't have to worry about me anymore. You're free of me now. I hope one day you'll find peace, even if I don't deserve to be part of it. I'm so sorry, David. Emily. The letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor. My heart felt like it stopped, my mind blank except for one single thought repeating itself over and over again. What did she mean? I bolted from the bedroom, my feet pounding down the stairs as I grabbed my keys and raced out the door. My heart slammed in my chest as I drove, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, but something told me where I'd find her. The cliffs. The same cliffs where I'd confronted her only a day earlier, where the waves crashed violently against the rocks below. The car skidded as I pulled into the empty parking lot. I jumped out, sprinting toward the trail, the wind whipping through my hair. My chest burned with every breath, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Emily. I shouted into the darkness, my voice barely carrying over the roar of the ocean. Emily. When I reached the overlook, I froze. The wind was stronger here, tugging at me as I stood on the edge. There was no one in sight, just the endless black water below, its surface broken by whitecaps and foam. I scanned the area frantically, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then I saw it. Her shoes. A pair of familiar black flats, neatly placed next to the railing. I stumbled back, my legs nearly giving out beneath me as the truth slammed into me like a freight train. No, I whispered, my voice barely audible. No, no, no. I grabbed the railing, leaning over the edge, desperate to see something, anything, that told me she was okay. But there was nothing below. Only darkness. Only the relentless crashing of the waves against the jagged rocks. The police arrived an hour later after I called, my voice shaking as I gave them the details. They asked questions, lots of them. I answered in a daze, staring blankly at the shoes still sitting by the railing, untouched. A search was launched, but I already knew what they would find. Emily was gone. The days that followed were a blur. Friends and family offered their condolences, their words hollow and meaningless. My house felt empty without her, the silence more suffocating than any argument we'd ever had. I replayed it all in my head over and over again, every choice I made, every word I said. I thought about the letter she left, the way she wrote that she couldn't face what came next. Had I pushed her too far? Had my plan for revenge turned me into something worse than her betrayal ever could? I'd wanted her to feel pain. I'd wanted her to hurt the way I hurt. But I never wanted this. I found myself sitting in our bedroom late one night, holding the letter in my hands. I traced her handwriting with my thumb, my vision blurring with tears. I never stopped loving you. Her words echoed in my mind, haunting me. I thought I'd won, that I'd burned everything down to make her pay. But the ashes she left behind were mine to carry now, and the weight of them was unbearable. Months passed, but the grief didn't fade. I started visiting the cliffs every week, standing at the edge where I'd last seen her shoes. Sometimes I thought I heard her voice in the wind, whispering apologies I didn't deserve. One night, I stayed longer than usual. The wind was cold, biting at my skin, and the darkness felt heavier than it ever had before. I stepped closer to the railing, gripping it tightly as I stared down into the abyss. For the first time, I understood. Revenge didn't heal me. It didn't make the pain go away. All it did was destroy 2 lives instead of 1. "I'm sorry," I whispered into the wind, hoping she could hear me. "I'm so sorry." The waves roared back at me, indifferent, unforgiving. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly alone.